my name is Karen. I'm on the Inspire Ed Convention Planning Committee, and it is my privilege to introduce to you one of my heroes. Sandra Paetkau has been helping schools across the globe leverage technologies to transform learning in their classrooms and to empower learners. And technology has changed a lot since she first started, but she's passionate about helping teachers use those advances in technology to transform learning in their classrooms. She's also working on her PhD right now in instructional design and technology. She's a program director at Prairie College in Alberta, Canada, and she also has her own consultancy, the Total Takeover, and that is dedicated to helping schools use technology to transform learning. So without further ado, here is Sandra.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'll pretend that there is great applause going on as we are recording this session due to technical difficulties that occurred earlier. I have a mantra that always says, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when technology will either disrupt or go down or prove difficult. And so it is not a problem today. We're going to carry on with what we have got available for us today. As Karen mentioned, I am Sandra Paetkau. I'm not going to reintroduce myself. You can look at my biography included. And but if you want to follow me on Twitter, if you want to join the Twitter chat, these are the two hashtags that you can use for today's session or for the future when you're reading this. So the Inspire Ed hashtag below, as well as mine, DigLead 2025. It is a mission of mine to be a digital leader and reach over 1,000 educators and educational leaders with technology and digital leadership ideas. So that is a little bit there. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself later in regards to how I came across this, but I want to thank you so much for attending this session or for choosing to click the recording link. There are so many good sessions going on that are very relevant for today's world and situation, and so I just want to thank you so much for clicking on this one, and I'm hoping that you will be inspired, that you will be challenged, and that you'll be given some tools and tricks and tips of how you might bring collaboration to your situation, to your context. All right. Building community through online collaboration. I'm not entirely sure how much experience you have had with building with online collaboration or using that in your classroom or just collaboration in general. But today we want to take a look at not just collaboration or not just online collaboration, but how do we use this and how do we leverage this in order to build community in our classroom, but not just our classroom, but because we have these online technologies, how we can build community globally using these techniques that we might want to talk about today. In other sessions that I have heard today, I think this is a very relevant topic, and I'm thankful to be presenting on this today. But in our morning session today that we had with Dr. Swanner, and I have popped into other sessions along the way today that you may have been involved in, but I'm hearing words like collaboration or building relationships or the importance of relationships and the importance that we have to come together to surround each other with building each other up. And I think this is one way that we can navigate or that we can use collaboration to help do that. But what as we go through today's slides or session, and it's going to look a lot different than it would have if we were doing this live, so we're going to do the best that we can. But as we're going through this, I want you to take a look at this essential question: how does a collective mindset of collaboration work to strengthen the community? So I'm just going to have you take a moment just to reflect on that, to read through that essential question again. And as you are reading this, if you want to tweet out a quick answer, you're welcome to do so. If you want to share this with a friend, or if you're watching this together with somebody, how does a collective mindset of collaboration work to strengthen the community? Well, I have no doubt that we all have experiences with online collaboration or with collaboration in general. And I do have a couple of people in this room to help participate today. And so I'm very thankful for them. And so we won't be completely alone. But I've got this poll. We're going to create a little bit of a Wordle. And if you're watching online, if you're watching within 48 hours of this presentation, so today is Friday the 12th. And so if you're watching this before Sunday, you could actually add to this Wordle by going to menti.com and then using the code that is provided. So the code that you would use, once you get to menti.com, it's going to ask you to type in a code, and the code is 42658075. And you could participate by creating a Wordle. What are 3 words that you would use to describe your or your students' experiences with collaborative opportunities? And so think back to when you were in college, think back to when you were in high school, junior high, think back to collaborative activities as a staff, think back to, whatever you have done and what your students have done. What are 3 words that you would use to describe your students' experiences with collaborative opportunities? Let's see if the code is, it's not on the screen. That's right. Of course not. You can't see it. 42658075. So again, you'll have to forgive us as we kind of mumble through this together. And I've got a couple of people putting in some answers. Here we go. There's one. Just one. You can have 3 in there. Regardless, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but if there was 90 people participating in this, we would have a nice collection of ideas of what collaboration looks like, or what the experiences have been. Do my attendees have other ideas in there? No, it's okay. Of course, there's going to be the gamut from a really positive experience all the way over to it's been very, very frustrating. And so I understand that this can happen. And so today we want to talk a little bit about the pros and the cons and what you might expect. Before we go any further, I would like to pray over this. I had meant to do that earlier, and my apologies for that. We just got carried away and excited by this. But let's just take a time to pray for what we are looking at today. God, thank you so much for today and for this opportunity to come together. And for those who are watching at a different time, thank you so much for their interest and dedication to our learners' lives and what we can accomplish together through collaboration. And as we journey through online collaboration, I just pray that that you will provide ideas of how we can navigate this for your kingdom as we build community for you and to glorify you. So thank you very much. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. All right. So I've done that. If I want to get back to this idea of what collaboration is or what your experiences have been, and I want you to take an idea or think about, well, then if we have engaging, if we have frustrating, if we have everything in between, if we have difficult to set up, if we have ideas of students or ourselves not knowing how to work through a collaborative opportunity, why do we do it? Why do we do the collaboration process? And again, take a moment to think about this. Why do we do this? Why do we think collaboration is important? Why have the speakers earlier today commented about the power of collaboration or the power of relationship building and in collaborating with teachers or for students collaborating in their work? So why do we do collaboration projects? Okay. So as we continue, think about your why. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about my why and how we got into this, or how I discovered this, or went forward with online collaboration. So in 2013, this is how I got started in online collaboration. 2013, I worked in Saudi Arabia, and I taught at a Saudi girls' school. And if in this Middle Eastern culture in Saudi Arabia, it is very much a culture of isolation. And so the girls would come to school, and they would be in classes, and then afterwards they would all go home to their houses, and the only people that they were allowed to interact with were those who were in their family or their extended family. And there were no after-school activities, or very few of them. And so really it was my students would literally come to school, go home, that was it. And so I began to think about, well, how could we collaborate in this environment? How could I get my students talking to each other outside of the classroom? How could we use these online platforms to build this community outside of the classroom? And so I began to examine and take a look at online collaboration, online tools, starting to design these activities for them in an effort to help them connect with each other outside the school. And so that's where I got my start, and that's kind of where it became my why as to why do we do this and how do we get there for this project. But in the Bible, we are often reminded too as to the importance of collaboration. And so we take a look in Genesis and how God determined that it was not good for man to be alone. And so he made Eve as a partner. We are told in Ecclesiastes that King Solomon recognized the virtue of two working together to share in the benefit, or to share and to reap in those rewards. We're told in Corinthians, in 1 Corinthians, the value of community, about, it's not just a hand or not just a foot, but we are all working together in this body of Christ. And so the value of online collaboration, or value of collaboration, or feeling the sense of community, it has been around or is innate in us. We desire to be in community. And in this particular time of COVID, community seems to have been shattered a lot of times. I know that I have been in the last 2 years grieved the community that I had established or that I was a part of, because it could no longer meet in the way that it had been doing. And so we lost a lot of sense of our community. And so we desire this. We desire to be in community. But what often I have found is that for collaboration in particular, how do we do this effectively? How do we set this all up so it is a positive experience, so that we can assure ourselves that our students are going to reap those benefits of being in collaboration? And so we recognize the importance of collaboration, but often we lack the framework or the structure for the how to do so. Okay, I'm not sure how familiar you may be or may not be with the International Society for Technology in Education, ISTE. But when we're taking a look at where do we start finding out what the framework or what a structure could be or why, I always start with the ISTE standards. And so for the ISTE standards, if you're not familiar with them, or the ISTE in general, it is an organization that is dedicated to technology in the classroom. And in the last 5 years, so in 2016, they have redefined the standards that students are to meet in the classroom for technology use. A large portion of this United States, they have adopted the ISTE standards as their technology standards within a school. A number of schools and districts in Canada have done the same. And this is actually an international organization. And so in Saudi Arabia, the schools that I worked at over there, we ended up adopting these as well, of how to get started or what to do with technology in the classroom. So if you're not sure where to start, this is a good place to start. In the Wakelet, I sent out a Wakelet on the chat line, but you will have access to all of these resources. I'll make sure that you have those. And so if you're not sure how to get there, visit the resource package that I have available. Hopefully it's going to be included with this recording and you'll be able to get there. But I want to take a look at one of the standards in particular that ISTE has, and it is the Global Collaborator. And so the International Society for Technology and Education, through a series over years and hundreds of educators' input, determined that one standard that to explore in the classroom is this concept of being a global collaborator. And so I know that this is going to be difficult for you to see on the screen right now, so I'll just read out the overarching objective. Students use digital tools to broaden their perspectives and enrich their learning by collaborating with others and working effectively in teams locally and globally. This idea of global collaborator obviously would be difficult without digital tools, without having the online components. And so, again, ISTE has broken down this idea of global collaborative. Well, what does that look like? What do our students need to be able to do and why? And so if you examine these standards of 1.7 A, B, C, and D, you'll discover that the common phrases are discovering other people's perspectives, joining together for a common goal, having teams and working towards that end result, exploring local and global issues, using collaborative technologies to work with others to investigate solutions. And so I believe that if we examine those and unpack those standards, we start to see how those standards would work or work towards building a community. Again, in our society, we have a lot of divisive perspectives and a lot of divisive ideas, and collaborative activities or opportunities are a way forward for students, for us, to seek out other perspectives, to seek out understanding why they are so important to listen to. And so I would like to encourage you to take a look at this Global Collaborator standard when you are in your classes, and figure out how you might tweak an assignment or tweak an exercise that might include these things here. One of our discussion questions that I had for us to work through was, and I'm not, obviously we can't take time today to do this because we're now recording and this is not live, but as you examine your course, again, I'm going to wager a guess that if you examine the ISTE standards for students, you're already doing this in your class. And again, the ISTE standards are not meant to impose another level on you. It is meant to help you examine what you're already doing so well, and then how can we elevate that maybe to include these digital technologies, and we're going to talk about those shortly. But questions to ask: how would you define collaboration? Number 2, what might a collective mindset of collaboration work to strengthen? How might a collective mindset of collaboration work to strengthen the community? That was our overarching essential question. And how are students already meeting the ISTE standards in your classroom? Okay. I want to touch a little bit on the how would you define collaboration before we move on, because there's a difference between collaboration and communication. And I have seen this in schools in my own work of the difference between collaboration and communication. And so if we're defining collaboration according to the ISTE standards, it is more about, I'm going to click on this one, here we go. So collaboration is a group of people coming together to offer and accept different perspectives to work towards a common goal. Often we have this idea of, we call it collaboration when we have students in a group and they are discussing an idea. That is collaborative learning, yes, but it's not necessarily collaboration or collaborative projects. And so when we're taking a look at the difference between communication or collaborative learning and collaboration, I want to make sure that I am emphasizing that we're talking about collaboration. Collaborative learning is incredibly important, and I use it often and you're going to see evidence of it later, but to get people into the idea of collaboration itself, I think is very difficult to launch into a collaboration project or a collaborative activity without having an understanding of what collaborative learning is. And I'm going to talk about that in approximately 5 slides. And so the difference between those two things. But the mindset of having collaboration is a group of people coming together to offer and accept different perspectives to work towards a common goal. And in here, you're going to discover, or you're probably saying that, how do we understand different perspectives? How do we seek them? What do we do to get students engaged or actively pursuing different perspectives? And that's all coming forward. Those are some of the questions that I would have, that I would anticipate to have come through the question and answer chat board in this presentation. So I'm hoping I'm answering some questions as we go along. Okay. So when? So we have the why, or so we have the why. We have a little bit of the what. So the why do we do collaborative projects? We're doing collaborative projects to build community, to understand different perspectives, and work as a team for a common goal. We have the what it is, and I just said it. It's coming together towards a common goal. But when do we do collaborative activities? When do we do collaborative learning? When do we do collaboration or collaborative activities? Because they take time. Sometimes they can. So I've just got a when should we collaborate? I don't want to belabor this. You're going to have access to this in the Wakelet in the Wakelet activities. So formative, I do collaborative learning projects in the formative. This is collaborative learning discussion protocols. I don't know if you are familiar at all with the National School Reform faculty, but if you're wondering how to get started, I would do that. And I've actually got a slide for that coming up. It's really difficult to do a recorded version versus a live version, I have to say, of a presentation. So bear with me. Thank you so much for getting to this point. We're gonna keep on going. So when should we collaborative? So formative assessments or forming the idea. I do these at the beginning of a unit. I would do collaborative learning activities at the beginning, the middle, the end, depending on that need. Collaborative learning projects might take an hour. They might take 3 hours. They might take a week. But we can gauge those later. Projects. This is where I spend a lot of my time, is doing collaborative multimedia projects, and I'm going to show you an example of one of those when we get to the how do we do this. Action projects, community, national, or international projects. This is where where it would be possible to collaborate with another class across the planet, or down the street, or across the country. But what are some things that we can examine at the community, national, or international level? And then long-term teams. I also have done entire year-long collaborative projects, and so that takes a lot of planning on the front end of things, but they are possible to have this entire thing expanding an entire year or an entire semester. Before I move on, I have mentioned this a couple of times. Again, a Wakelet. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Wakelets, but you should have access to my Wakelet, online collaboration. And in here, you'll find all of my resources, but in particular, if you want to get to the meat and potatoes, I have an online collaboration, a personal journey PDF in here. If you click on that, you will see everything that I am documenting as to how I got started and how I went through this process of getting my students into a space of collaboration. So just keep that in mind, that you can access that. Okay, going back to here. Alrighty. One question I get asked a lot is, Sandra, what are your favorite apps? Where do you go to collaborate? And I think this is a great question. And so where do we do the collaboration? If we're talking about online collaboration, what are some spaces that have been set up ideally to do collaborative projects or ideas or collaborative learning? And so these are some of my favorites. And again, these are all in my Wakelet. I've given access, or I've uploaded all of their websites so you can see what they are. But these are some of where I go. So once I have when do I want to do this? Where might I do this? Often people are going to say, well, have the structure first or have the goal first. And I would agree with that, but I have an idea, like I want to know where are some ideas that I can, or where are some places that I can collaborate online. So these are some of my favorites that I use. And starting at the top left of the screen, that is Tiki Toki Timeline, We Video, ThingLink, Canva. This entire presentation is on Canva. It's a great collaborative platform for building media assets. Poplet, Padlet, and Wakelet. And again, these are all found on my Wakelet. You can see that and find out what they are more in depth. I have got Google and Microsoft right front and center, the front, because this is where all the planning happens. So I use Google Docs for all of the planning purposes. Those of you who use Microsoft, with Microsoft 365, those are now collaborative platforms as well. So that is easy for you to use. But the platform needs to be dictated by the task. Yes, it is important to know what collaborative platforms are available, and I encourage you to seek those out, but the platform should not be directing the task. The task needs to dictate the platform. Because if these are cool things to use. These platforms are all really cool. But if they don't allow you to accomplish the task that you have at hand, then that is not going to be functional for you, or it's not going to be effective for the students either. So just keep that in mind. All right, but how? The million-dollar question. Sandra, how do we do this? And so this is definitely the crux of it all. How do we get our students to enter into this collaboration? Because again, if we have collaboration, if we don't have a format or a structure, if we don't have that foundation, we can't expect students to go from 0 to 60 and be these wizards at collaboration. I'd like you to reflect on your own experiences with collaboration and collaborative teaching, and what kind of skills and what kind of mindset it takes for you to be successfully involved in a collaborative project with your peers. And so for our students, getting them into a mindset of how do we collaborate and seek others' perspectives. So how do we do that? Number one, start small. Starting small, build students' confidence to enter into a collaborative community. This could be done in discussion groups with discussion protocols. I mentioned it earlier. I said I was going to chat about it later. Well, today, right now, is the later part. If you are not familiar with the National School Reform faculty, I would highly recommend checking them out. So discussion protocols, for me, in my experience that I've had, working with students, working with teachers, these help facilitate conversations. It directs people through either a problem, through a text, through a project, through a number of different protocols for different purposes again. And this allows students to rest in the protocol and go, okay, it's not my turn to talk yet, or it is my turn to talk, and this is what I have to say, and this is how much time I have to say it. Protocols allow for those students who may be more shy or reluctant. It gives them time. It gives them a structure for their participation. You might choose to have a protocol, and as you explore them, you might have an option where it is online, where the students can take the time in which to formulate their thought and then put that into an online platform. I use a lot of Padlet for these. I use Padlet for this a lot. And so putting the prompts or putting the protocols online. I use Google Docs for these, again, depending on what the protocol is that I use. If you are new to protocols, the one that I generally start with would be either the 4A protocol. You'll find it in here, the 4A protocol, or the Chalk Talk protocol. Those are really good ones to get started for your students. But again, the protocols allow students to enter into this collaborative learning environment. And if we go back, I just want to reiterate, starting small, build their confidence to enter into a collaborative community. As a teacher, then you are able to monitor their involvement. You can see how familiar they're getting with each other. when I started with this way back when, it took approximately 2 to 3 months for my students to start feeling really comfortable with each other in these online discussions, in these collaborative learning opportunities. They learned how to ask the questions of each other. They allowed themselves to be vulnerable. And so we can't expect people to be vulnerable with their peers immediately. This all needs to be built. And part of being in a community is to be vulnerable and ask questions and to engage authentically with each other. And so start small, and whether this takes you 1 month, 1 week, 1 year, just getting them into that attitude of being there. Okay. And then you can start to think big. I'm going to, I don't know how much time I have taken already, but I want to get onto I want to show you a collaborative activity that I created, and you will have access to this in the Wakelet session. So you can take it, you can modify it, you can see how I've outlined it, but I want to show you the components that I have used in a full-on collaboration activity. This is a multimedia collaborative activity where in grade 12 I had students create a social commentary website. So they could choose to do a newspaper, or they could choose to do a website, or a magazine, but it had to be online, and they had to be able to share it or publish it to a wider audience. And one of the things that I have found helpful in an online community or online collaboration project, if we give them an audience, they go far above and beyond anything that I could ever expect them to do. So they will take that, and because this is now published to the public, my students were really keen to get this right. So I just want to highlight a few ideas when we're getting into developing and designing full-on collaboration activity. Number one, it's always about the goals first. What are the goals and the outcomes? What do I want them to do? And in here, again, this is probably going to be really small for you, but you'll be able to see this as you take a look in my in the Wakelet. Again, I'm just going to read out this rationale or the purpose story. Students will explore a topic from a variety of perspectives and through various formats and genres. A common argument or thematic thread will be evident throughout the pieces. Students also need to be able to support their ideas with facts and logical reasoning. I was really focusing on the ISTE standards of getting different perspectives. I was focusing on having various formats of presentation or engagement with material. And so I really took a look at that. And then, of course, this all related to our curricular goals and outcomes for this particular unit in English 12. To be strong critical thinkers, it is important to be able to convey an idea through various formats and genres to appeal to a wider audience base. And so that's what they had to do. They had to collaborate and create a publishable social commentary. So number one is having your goals and outcomes at the first and foremost. And number two then is figuring out where on the platforms or where on the which app they're going to present on. Students could choose, they had the choice between Wix. No, Wix didn't exist back then. They had Weebly, and then there's a couple students who chose their own website building platform. Unfortunately, Weebly no longer has their educational site, so that's kind of sad. All right. So I outlined that. So number one, outline, provide a rationale, provide the outcomes. Number two, provide the resources that they are going to need. And by resources, I also mean like the format and the structure. And so I created a collaborative process. I wanted my students to understand that collaboration has a process, and everybody has a role to play. And again, these are available for you in the Wakelet. You do not need to worry about trying to read these all. So I provide them resources of what is the collaboration process? What does it look like? What's the flow chart for that? So connect, cultivate, create, congratulate is a process or a format or a following from A to B of how to manage and navigate your collaboration process. I also included a flow chart for conflict management. There's going to be conflict in collaborative projects. I've seen them in my own personal and professional life when I'm collaborating with peers or with other members of staff. So what is a reasonable conflict management? So helping our students navigate that conflict as they arise. What are the steps that they should take before just shutting down and moving away from that journey. So having a conflict management collaboration process. I also created some team roles. And again, these are very specific to multimedia presentations. And so you want to have your team roles. You want to have how is everybody going to be equally involved? And not relying on one person. If you examine these team roles, I worked deliberately to have these different roles where if one person was not contributing, it was evident which one it was, because I'm going to wager a guess we have all been in a collaborative activity where one person just does nothing, and therefore we're afraid that we're going to get collectively a bad grade because of it. And so in here, if you take a look at these, if there's for example the resource manager, so I'm just looking at the bottom right hand corner here, it's very tiny, I know. It says ensures all members are documenting their sources correctly, ensures that the final product has a complete reference page, ensures that all resources are copyright compliant. Well, as an evaluator, as a teacher, if I go in and I see that there is not the APA page, if there are mistakes in the APA, if there is resources that are not copyright compliant, I know that it was a resource manager. It wasn't everybody, it was a resource manager. And so that person was not effective in completing that activity. And so I went through and tried to create jobs where can the rest of the group still perform their duties? Can they still collaborate and get their work done without their resource manager? Yes, they certainly can. And so things can still move forward. So I think that's important. That's important for success. Okay, so we've got team roles, we have a format, we have a structure. And again, those are free for you to use from the Wakelet resource package. And then I have got a list. Again, you're going to see this. I just have a list of everything that the final work must include. So I go through and I have an outline of very detailed. This is what their websites had to include. So have a very detailed list of the tasks. What do they have to do? I create a rubric, as we often do. I like single cell rubrics. And so I've really moved into this phase of I've got a rubric, it's got one cell. Did they accomplish it? Did they not accomplish it? Or so did they accomplish it? And does it exceed expectations or does it meet expectations? And so does it meet them? Great. Does it exceed? Wow. Because I want students to take ownership of their learning and evaluate for themselves, were we able to accomplish this? And if we were able to accomplish it, did we exceed the expectations for our group? And when my students did this particular activity, they all were so far and above exceeding my expectations. All right. The collaborative space. I want to talk specifically about the collaborative space. I mentioned earlier in the where do we collaborate, a lot of resources that we can use, but I use Google Docs and you can use Microsoft for your collaborative space. How do you set that up? One thing that I discovered that works really well is if you have a space and each member in the space has a different color. And so, for example, I have got member number 1 here. They might be in pink. I can't access this. I have to request added access again, due to how we had to formulate this really quickly in order to record this. I'm unable to enter into this document as I would normally. But I set up spaces where they are using different colors. They get to talk about who is their team leader, identify those. And I also include a contract. I include a very small contract that says, type your name below if you agree with the following. I, so-and-so, have read and understand the assignment and rubric. I have read and understand the collaborative process. I have read and understand the responsibilities of each team role for the team role. I agree to complete my responsibilities to the best of my abilities in a timely fashion according to the timeline set by the group. I find that signing a contract and having students take responsibility for their involvement in a collaborative activity or in a collaborative project, then I am able to go back and say, hey, look, you signed this contract. Therefore, let's negotiate what you're doing here. Like, tell me a little bit about your processes and how are you meeting this contract, or how are you not meeting this contract? And again, it puts a lot of ownership on them. And then coming up with brainstorming ideas, or coming up with, again, where do they collaborate, answering questions, using following spaces, so on and so forth. And then again, putting in that space. I had mentioned in an earlier slide, allowing students to feel comfortable and giving them confidence to work in this space. I started using Google Docs with my students, and they were collaborating on these activities. And pretty soon, I did not take very long, probably 3-5 weeks at the most, where I would be giving an activity or an assignment or a discussion, and I would hear in my class, all right, who's setting up the Google Doc? And the students automatically started taking it upon themselves. Like, all right, who's got that going on? Where are we going to put our stuff? Who's using Padlet? Are we using Poplet? Are we using Padlet? What are we doing here? And so very soon, by giving them the tools or getting them comfortable in these platforms and in this idea, the students took it upon themselves to start doing that. I even heard them doing it in other classes. And so I taught also besides English, I also taught theater and film studies. And I wasn't teaching them all about the collaboration, but I would have some of those students in another class, and I would hear them say, all right, everybody, we've got to get onto a Google Doc. And so we've got to set up our collaborative space. And so I had students that was starting to transfer over into other classes that, yes, I was teaching in, but that I was not teaching them specifically online collaboration. And so within a year, we had established a sense of collaboration, of community online. I had students who would be working on a project outside of school with each other. They would come into class and they would just be continuing their conversation that they had online and bringing it into class. And it was a real sense of community that they had established for themselves online and then offline in the classroom. It was really quite something. I do have an example of what this looked like, except for whatever reason, it cannot load, but you do have access again to it in the Wakelet. I consulted with the IT people here, and we could not get their website to open. But in the Wakelet, if you click on the Tarut mangroves, you will see the end result of 3 of my students from that time of what they were able to accomplish with this activity. Okay, we're nearing the end. We're almost there. I'm sure I'm going over time. I tend to talk too much. Just as a review, I'm not going to go through these too in depth because you have access to all of these. Again, as the tips and the tricks, just a very quick review. First and foremost, goals, ISTE standards, curricular outcomes. Get that settled first. What do you want them to accomplish for goals and curriculum? What ISTE standards might you want them to master? Multifaceted. I find that collaborative activities that have multimedia, because then you're going to get people who really like to write and investigate. You're going to get people who like to do the videos or the photography. You're going to get those students who really like to be fiddly with the APA English language skills. Trust me, they're out there. You're going to get those students who really enjoyed these different parts of a project. And then they get to play on their strengths, find their passions, find their strengths. Biggest one is find a space in the role, define that space, define that collaborative space. Where do you want them to collaborate? Where do you want them to produce? It doesn't always have to be a presentation. If you take a look at some of those platforms that I've provided, there's many things that they can do. I've done documentary videos. I have done social media websites or social commentary websites. Students have done music videos. And so there's just so many things that you can do besides a presentation for them to display and showcase their understanding of your material. Be active. I'm always active on the students' collaborative platforms. They have to share those with me so I can see who is interacting with who, how often, and what are they saying. I can encourage them. I can challenge them to ask deeper level questions. And so I would encourage you to be active in letting them know that you're involved with their process. Digital skills. Big one. No need to be an expert in the technology. The students have got that covered. Just know that it exists and let them take it. Failure, be prepared to fail, because it will. And so there is no if, it is a matter of when. And so just be prepared for that. I guess I did go through those. I said I wouldn't, and there I was. All right. And again, just to review, standards, I've said all that. I'm not going to go through it again. You can take a look at it. Revisit our thing. With the stories that I have told, with the platforms that are available, with that one example that I have shown, and again on the Wakelet, if you go to, on my Wakelet, if you go to this online collaboration personal journey here, I'll click on that, maybe. There we go. Wow. Okay, you'll click on it and you'll bring it up. I have included many more activities that I have done in the past, and continue to do currently in our master's degree program. We're also doing collaborative activities online. So this just gives you an idea of some other ideas that I have done, or projects that students have done. So do take a look at that. Okay. So how might a collective mindset of collaboration work to strengthen your classroom community? I know what it did for mine. I know what it's doing for my current classroom of collaboration, of how they are pursuing each other's perspectives, how students of mine are contributing to the discussions, to ongoing discussions, how they are actively involved in pursuing understanding, and for putting forth and feeling comfortable and vulnerable to put forth their own understanding and their work that they are doing, or of what they are. Okay. All right. So again, the why. Why do we do collaborative activities? What is our purpose? For me, it is about building that community. It is about of having that, coming to a mutual understanding or of ideas and presentation of ideas. But ultimately, the why, if we are committed to building these communities, if we are committed to having these structures and frameworks for collaboration, my ultimate goal is to build a community of kingdom builders. Because I think that's what we need now. And so, thank you very much. And as you go forth, I always cry when I get emotional because I think we have the power to do this. So thank you for your time. For those of you who scrubbed through it, that's fine. You'll go back and revisit my stuff. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the work that you do. If you have any questions, please connect with me on Twitter. You can also email me at Sandra@thetotaltechover.com. God bless you in your work. Thank you so much.